Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week. This week, I had a really big haul. This is like back in the day type of big haul, which is 20 books. And then next week, I have 22 books. So, of course, if you are recognizing you have a big haul this week as well, it's because for the holidays, I haven't looked at January, but for Christmas, there's like 5 books coming out. There's not a lot of books, so they're trying to bring all the books that would have came out that month into these other months, and then also there's new books coming out, so it's just making your haul very hefty. We'll see how that brings us into the new year, but let's get started. Number 20 for me this week is Fantastic Four issue 17. I do like this series a lot, just not really this arc right now. It's how the Fantastic Four got their powers. There's the other people who also have powers from the same entity. So we discover the actual person who gave them powers, and it's them interacting with these other characters that, again, have these powers as well, and I'm not really invested in these new characters. There's just a lot of them, and I haven't really been able to grab onto them, and I just want to see the Fantastic Four together. Also, the artwork is kind of plain for me. Not a huge fan of the art style, so overall, just wasn't really a fan of this issue. So I'm going to give that 2 stars, and that is number 20. Moving on to number 19. Which is the Dark Multiverse Teen Titans The Judas Contract, which I kind of just realized they're probably releasing these because of Crisis on Infinite Earths, the TV show special, but I have not liked any of these. I haven't read all of them. I read The Blackest Night, I read Death of Superman, and now Teen Titans Judas Contract, because I am a Teen Titans fan, and I read the other 2, so I'm like, alright, let me see how this story ends. And what really deters me from this series is honestly those opening pages are not that interesting, and then it already kind of brings you a bad vibe for the book. And then what I feel like I don't like about these series is obviously not that it's an Elseworld story. I do like Elseworld stories, and I think there's a way to tell an impactful story in a one-shot or in another universe, even if it doesn't continue. And I think the biggest issue is that Dark Multiverse doesn't really have a cohesive theme. It's just like, alright, everyone's a little darker, even though these stories are already kind of dark, because Blackest Night is a dark story, Death of Superman is a dark story, and then Teen Titans Judas Contract, one of the darker stories for DC as well. So it's like, why do we need to make them darker? Why not, like, show some light into these stories instead, or make the stories that are happy into dark stories? Like, it doesn't work. You got 2 of the same thing. It just kind of bogs it down. You're not conflicting at all. Or contradicting, sorry. So, yeah, just not a fan. I will say the artwork is cool, though, because if you are a fan of this generation of the Teen Titans, I feel like it does fit Perez's style very well. And the coloring definitely jumps out a lot, but Terror becoming more evil wasn't really my thing. So I'm going to give that 2 stars, I believe, and that was number 19. And also it was like pretty pricey. It was like $5.99, pretty long, just not worth the money for such a big haul this week. Moving on to number 18, which is Undiscovered Country issue 2. So I'm trying to give this like a fair shot. Issue 1 I thought was okay. I definitely liked the themes of it. I do like stories that kind of delve into American history. I was a huge fan of Scott Snyder's American Vampire, so I was looking forward to this book, but there's just not enough character work for me here. It's just really hard to grab to all these concepts, and I did read a little bit at the back where, I don't know if it was Charles or Scott. I think it was Charles talking. Yeah, Charles did little letter in the back, and he explains like it's kind of like a lost book where you have to unpack the mystery, but I feel like we have so much mystery and not enough investment. There's no big moment where I'm like, oh my god, I need to get the next issue. I'm just kind of feel like there's too much going on, and again, I don't know the voices of all the characters. I will say this issue tries to do a better place of that, where we do get to see 2 of the main characters are siblings that we learn, and that they used to live in America. So actually that was my favorite part of the issue, and then it just doesn't really continue from there. We do follow the boy character, but not enough with his relationship with his sister, which I think would have grounded the book a little bit more. Artwork-wise, I like it a lot. I think it's, really dynamic. very gruesome at times too. I like how the colors pop. So I like that. I just don't know how long I'm going to stick with this book. I've just not invested yet. So I'm going to probably give it another issue or two and kind of call it from there. So I'm going to give that 2.5 stars, and that is number 18. Moving on to number 17, a book I honestly wasn't going to get, but because I got so many of the previous issues, I'm like, all right, I guess I'll get it. And that is Spider-Man 2009 issue 1. I have not been liking this current Amazing Spider-Man arc. I love Spencer's run, but I could care less about the 2009 universe. I did get the Alpha issue, and I'm like, all right, this is not my thing. I'm not getting the Omega issue. I didn't get any of the other 2009 stories. But because I'm a Spider-Man fan, and because I want to like Miguel, I picked this up. And he's not even Spider-Man in this book. I don't know what was really going on. He kind of remembers that he was Spider-Man and is kind of being haunted by it, and that's the issue. And you learn a little bit more about his family and those dynamics. But yeah, I was a little confused with this issue, and I just wasn't very invested. Again, just don't really care about this arc overall. I will say I like the artwork a lot, though. I like kind of the cartoonish nature to it. It brought those emotions into the book, even if I didn't quite care about Miguel himself, which, hindered on the relationships. But overall, I'm going to give that 2.5 stars. And how much money was that? $5, too. Pretty hefty price tag for what it was, but it, you do get a good amount of pages for it. So yeah, giving that 2.5 stars, that's number 17. Moving on to number 16, which is X-Force issue 3. So I did move this digitally. I am going to continue it for, again, the next couple issues, see where it goes. But this out of all the X-Men books I'm picking up, I'm just not invested in it. I'm just not feeling it. I liked some of the stuff. Like, I enjoyed Jean's little monologue about death. That's probably my favorite aspect of the issue. I like the artwork a lot. And the reason I'm picking this up is because obviously it has a very big impact on the X-Men. You have Professor Xavier who dies, but he kind of comes back somehow in this issue. So yeah, there's a lot of impact in this issue and a lot of impact in this story. I don't know if I'm personally invested in that story. So we'll see. Like I said, I'm going to give that 2.5 stars, and we'll see how long that one sticks on my pull list. But I do like the artwork a lot, and I do think it has a lot of potential, and I see why people really like this title, but it's not for me. Moving on to number 15, which is Batman, Curse of the White Knight, Book 5. So this one focuses a little bit more on Azrael, and that's the part of the story I really don't care about is Azrael, and the stuff I did like was everything but Azrael. Like, I liked Harley and Batman's team up. I liked that Harley went to the Joker to try to get Jack back, pretty much, so I thought that was cool. We get some of the consequences of Jim's death and Batman missing the funeral. Very little Batgirl, sadly, but we did have a huge Batgirl issue last issue, so I understand. But yeah, it's just around ramifications of Jim's death and moving pieces forward, I would say, and learning more about that Azrael, which no, I'm not invested. So Batman Curse of the White Knight, Book 5 gets 3 stars. Beautiful artwork as always. Love the tone of this book, but wasn't my favorite issue of the series. Moving on to number 14, which is Betty Page Unbound, issue 7. So Betty Page, I really enjoyed the last issue. I know I didn't do an episode of when that came out, but I really enjoyed it going back to its espionage roots. I will say this issue kind of goes back to like the Z-list horror film aspect though, so it's pretty much Betty trying to go up against these insects. But the thing I liked about this issue is that it dug into her character a lot, her past, and I would say challenges that she's gone up against. And that part I really enjoyed about the issue. And it kind of had like a cool Spider-Man moment in that way, like picking up the cement, but for Betty. So I like that. Don't know how to feel about the insects, but I did like how it kind of crossed over with the actual Unbound story arc, which was seeing Betty's versions of the other Dynamite characters. So I thought that was pretty cool too. So overall, a good issue, but I just didn't really quite care about the insects, and there's a lot of insects in this issue. A lot of that, the issue has to do with that. So, also the artwork, as always, action, emotions, really, really well done. But I'm hoping it goes back to the espionage stuff like it did with the last issue. All right, moving on to number 13, which is The Immortal Hulk, issue 28. So if you're looking for Bruce Banner, he's not in this issue. Still an important issue, but he's not in it. And I will say, I don't know which character this is, but I don't know who he is. I think he's, dealing with something with Roxxon. I didn't quite care about his story as much, but the thing I was a bit more invested with was almost looks like Chris Samney's artwork for this story. I don't know who the artist is. Let me see if it tells us in the back. It's not Chris Samney, but it looks a lot like his style, where we get to kind of see this grounded story about this guy who's kind of blue collar and seeing the Hulk's politics seep through to his kid and him pretty much hating his kid because of it. And I thought it was a really interesting way to talk about current politics with the Hulk. So, and also seeing two very differing people in the same family having very different opinions on politics. So I like that story, and I kind of wish that was the whole issue. I don't know why it went back and forth. I know it was like to parallel each other, but wasn't a big fan of the other story. But overall, I liked the other one, and the Chris Samney styled artwork story. And it's a little bit of a filler issue, but I'm sure it's going to play a bigger part into the political aspect of this series. So, The Immortal Hulk, issue 28, gets 3 stars, and that is number 15? That was number 13, so losing count. But number 12 is Buffy Angel Hellmouth, issue 3. I like this arc, but I also don't like this arc. Like, I like that there is a crossover. I like that Angel and Buffy are learning more about each other in a different way. Buffy finds out Angel is a vampire and that he knew that Xander turned into a vampire. So I like that. I like the kind of aspect of how can they trust each other, especially because they don't know each other. But as the reader, you're like, of course you know each other. There's all this history, so it's kind of cool that they're rebuilding that and delving into a bit more of the Hellmouth mythos. But I don't feel like it's too soon. I wanted to see Buffy more in her own series. I want to see Angel, especially more in his own series. That really just started. So I feel like this story would have more impact if we got to see more of the other characters develop in their own little world. So I feel like it's a crossover that's just too soon. It's really struggling because of that. But the artwork is really good. I like the art a lot. Like this page, come on. There's some really cool pages here. And really good emotions overall too. So overall I'm going to give this 3 stars. Still not like my favorite event, but I think it has potential, especially as it grows into the other series aftermath of this story. Moving on to number 11, which is The Amazing Mary Jane, issue 3. So the stuff I like about this book is all the film aspects. So if you've ever worked in film or know a lot about film, this writer knows a lot about production. So it was kind of cool to see that and to see the lingo and have Mary Jane deal with it. So that's the stuff I liked. The delays of the film and all of these issues that they come along with it. The stuff I don't like actually is the superhero stuff, like the Sinister Six coming. I just felt like, hey, let's go back to the movie stuff. So I just feel like this book needs to find its own identity, and it still hasn't, and that's definitely been the struggle of it. But we'll see where it ends up going. I still had a fun time with it, and I like the very different styled superhero book here. So The Amazing Mary Jane issue 3 gets 3 stars? 3.5 stars, I believe. And that's 3.5 stars. Also, artwork's really good for this too, so especially for a bit more of an action-heavy issue. Moving on to number 10, which is Frozen issue 2, True Treasure. And as you guys know, huge Disney fan. I like Frozen a lot. And this story, I think, does a good job at tying into Frozen 2 without having to talk about Frozen 2. It definitely deals with Anna and Elsa's relationship more, which I feel like the previous ones were more like, let's go on an adventure and with this random character. So it was nice that it's more about character building, more about the parents, but I also kind of wish this came out a couple months later, because I think you would get a lot more from the parents if it did. But overall, I like this story. I think it's kind of a good point A, point B, or I would say in-between story for Frozen 1 between Frozen 1 and Frozen 2. Artwork's really good too. I think it works really well. I like the style. I will say the issue kind of ends abruptly though. Anna likes trying to tell a story to Elsa and it just kind of ends. So I'm like, oh, that wasn't much of a cliffhanger. I'm just like, I think that scene could have ended. But yeah, we'll see where issue 3 ends up going. I think it's a 3-issue miniseries, and we'll see where this franchise ends up going with Dark Horse. So I'm going to give that 3.5 stars, and that is number 10, I believe. That was number 10. Moving on to number 9, which is 5 Years, issue 6. This is the Strangers in Paradise Terry Moore universe book. And it's a little slower this issue, but there's characters we don't get to see as much. I loved Casey here. So Casey is a character from Strangers in Paradise. We have not seen her since that last issue of Strangers in Paradise, not even the sequel series. So it was nice seeing her again, and her and Tambi still together. And I love their dynamic, because Casey's kind of like the brighter side of Tambi, and Tambi doesn't even know how to say hello to a person. So that's definitely what made this issue. Then we go back to Stephanie, who's kind of the Parker girl villain going on, and her dealing with figuring out more about the side bomb, whatever you call it, the bomb that's gonna blow up the world. So I wish we got a little bit more from that. I think I kind of wish this issue just focused on one character, just focused on Tambi and Casey, because it went back and forth a lot. We also have Rachel and her dealing with being alive again, and she's dealt with that. But I actually really liked her inner monologue about dying and her relationship with it and not remembering things. So I enjoyed that a lot. It was a good opener. But then, it takes a break with the Stephanie scene, and then we got the Tambi scene. And I did like the ending where we get to see that Kachu's in Russia. So she's going to get into some trouble herself. And I like that Casey knew everything that was going on with Tambi's plans. So it's not just like, I'm the girlfriend and I don't know what's going on. It's cool that she's kind of part of the plans as well. So yeah, 5 Years, issue 6 gets 3.5 stars, and that is number 9. Moving on to number 8, which is Captain Marvel, issue 13. And this issue, I really liked the beginning a lot. I liked Iron Man and Captain Marvel's fight. I loved her monologue about her closeness to Tony and how that fight went. But then it kind of went into this exposition side of things of like, okay, now we found out why Carol's doing what she's doing, but I kind of wish they waited on that. I actually liked that we just jumped into it, and I didn't want it explained. I wanted it maybe revealed a little bit smoother, a little bit slower. So that was a little bit of a complaint of mine. And then I did like, though, Singularity from the A4 series that Kelly Thompson has done. She played a part in this story, so I thought that was cool. Artwork is phenomenal for the book. But yeah, I thought the first half was a bit stronger than the second. But overall, really invested in this evil Captain Marvel story. Look at that character design. It just blows me away. So yeah, I'm going to give Captain Marvel issue 13 3.5 stars. And that is number 8. Moving on to number 7, which is Go Go Power Rangers issue 26. Again, I think it's an issue that kind of putting the pieces together for something bigger. We get to see Tommy. You think he's just going to become the White Ranger. This is his solo journey. It's a little harder for him to become the White Ranger here than in the show, where it's just like, you're the White Ranger. So it's kind of cool that he has more of a journey. But there is a twist in the end that Lord Zed's like giving him an evil version of the White Dagger there. So I'm definitely invested in that cliffhanger. And then in the middle, we get a bit of the other Power Rangers and Jason dealing with the beginning of the Omega Rangers, and Trini and Zach's like, I don't know what we're going to do, but I guess we have to trust Jason. So again, it's a little slower of an issue, but definitely builds up to some bigger aspects here. And I will say maybe the Trini stuff and the Zach stuff would have had a bit of a bigger hit if I wasn't reading Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, because you kind of know how it ends, because that's a bit in the future. So I think that's why that was a little slower for me. But yeah, overall, enjoyed this issue. And if you're a hardcore Tommy fan, I think you'll really enjoy it. For me, I like Tommy. I'm not a hardcore fan of him, so I think that's also why it's a little lower. But yeah, still enjoyed the issue, and definitely excited for the ramifications with that cliffhanger. And artwork, as always, is really stunning for this book. So Go Go Power Rangers issue 26 gets 3.5 stars, and that is number 7. Moving on to number 6, which is Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy issue 4. I feel like it kind of went back to the roots of why I liked issue 1, which was Harley and Ivy, you know? And it's so interesting because I have seen all of the Harley Quinn show, and I just think about their dynamic from the show, which is a compliment to the TV show, honestly. I feel like they've kind of redefined Harley and Ivy, and now I'm just like, I kind of wish the source material was doing that, and I'm seeing hints of it with this series, but it's not like totally there, especially because they just won't say if they're in a relationship or not in this series for some reason, even though in previous books they have been. But yeah, I enjoyed their dynamic a lot here. I didn't quite care about the villain of this story, and I do feel like this series is a little bit too one-shotty and doesn't have like a full-on story arc for a miniseries, but artwork is really good for this book, and I think Harley and Ivy's relationship's what really puts the glue together, and I hope with these last 2 issues they explore that even further. So Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy issue 4 gets 3.5 stars, and that is number 6. So now we are moving on to number 5. And number 5 for me is, guess what? Made top 5. Superman issue 18. So I dropped this book a while ago. I dropped all the Superman books a while ago. And of course, with the secret identity reveal, I'm like, okay, I'll pick up this issue. Honestly, ages to review it. Like, I don't even know if I was really that curious of how he did it. I'm just like, I think it will be important to put it in my review. So I read it. And honestly, I thought it was a really solid read. I mean, you still kind of have like the Bendis things that I feel like he's hasn't been doing as well with his work on DC. Some of his dialogue is not as strong as it was in Marvel. A lot of repetitive dialogue that doesn't really work, like the Batman stuff. Like, I thought it was really funny, the Batman joke, when Adam Strange said it, and then, like, they referenced it, like, 2 other times, and I'm like, okay, it's kind of gotten old. And, you know, that type of dialogue I wasn't a huge fan of, but I like the story overall. I'm trying not to think of the ramifications of it, though, and that's a hardship. I like it as an individual story, and Superman reveals his identity. I honestly don't know why. Something about Jor-El. I must have missed something in between here when I wasn't reading Superman, unless it has to do with the Oz stuff, which I don't think it does. I didn't read those issues, so I wish it was a little new reader friendly in that regard, but he's like, yeah, I'm going to reveal my identity, and I liked how he went to go to Jimmy and says his identity, and then Lois tells him first. I thought was interesting. I like the 1-page, silent page where he tells Perry, and Perry hugs him. So there's a lot of nice small beats, and I liked Superman's point of view of it all. You know, him explaining his dual identity and what that means for the world, that means for his past. Also, the artwork was really good, especially for the emotional beats. So, overall, I thought it was a solid issue. I will get the next issue, see where it goes. I don't know if this really made me say, oh my god, Superman's back on my pull list. Because, again, as an overall story, I don't know if I care how it impacts in Superman or interested to see how it impacts, but every issue I'm going to get little by little to see where it ends up going. But I guess I care enough to see where the next issue goes. But as a character journey, I thought it was cool. But I don't know where it's going to go as an overall DC story / Superman story. Like, what's going to happen with him? I don't know if it's going to be good or not. So, Superman issue 18 gets 4 stars, and that is number 5. Moving on to number 4, which is, this is, I think, the first time it's in my top 5. New Mutants, issue 3. And surprisingly enough, the New Mutants aren't in this book. But honestly, that's why I thought this was the best issue we've gotten of this series thus far, because there was only, like, one main character here. Yeah, there are other characters, but we're following one point of view, and it made it so much easier to follow this story, and that's Armor. I will say it took me a while to figure out it was Armor, because they don't say her name until, like, the middle of the issue, and I'm like, I think this is Armor. But yeah, then they finally say Armor's name, and I'm like, okay, cool, it was Armor. And she realizes that maybe not all the X-Men are on Krakoa, and for some reason feels like it's her job to find the people that aren't, and, you know, she finds out her friend Beak and Angel are not part of this crew, and they go to their house and finds out Beak's dad was dying, and they used the Krakoa plant to help him. So I like that, because I believe Beak's parents are human, so I think it's cool that we're delving into that gray area that mutants don't want anything to do with humans. So, but, you know, so maybe sometimes a mutant's related to a human, and I like that, and hopefully we'll get to see the ramifications of that. Also, the artwork, even though it was a change, it's a little closer to the X-Men styles for the main book, so I thought that was really well done, because kind of reminded me of the X-Men type of storytelling, a bit more character-driven and then plot. And even though there was a lot of plot here, it definitely is more driven by character. So overall, I thought this was a really solid issue, and I hope this is the direction it continues to go in, even though this is not... is Armor part of the New Mutants? I don't know. I was going to say not a New Mutants character. I don't know if she was part of it or not, but she's not part of the direct team right now. So it's interesting that it's not the New Mutants team, and this was the better issue. So I'm going to give that 4 stars, and that is number 4. Moving on to number 3. Actually, I have to get this physically, this book, but it's Red Mother, issue 1. Boom Studios. I wish I got this physically. I did read it digitally, though. And this issue, I was actually pretty excited for this book from the description. I saw eye patch, and I was like, all right, I'm ready. I thought it was like, oh, she's going to be a badass. And with this issue, I loved how it opened. So it's just this girl and her boyfriend hanging out. I love their chemistry, and then her boyfriend gets kidnapped, and she loses her eye. She wakes up in the hospital, and it's her just dealing with all of that, you know, losing her boyfriend, losing her eye. It's definitely more of an emotional issue. It once again kind of takes character ahead of plot, but the plot kind of creeps in, and you see that her new eye is seeing stuff. Like there's this thing in the crowd by the end of the issue, and that's why I liked a lot about this issue. Is like it was such a slow burn. You know, I think most horror stories, they would jump the gun and be like, here's the monster, what's happening? And it's kind of cool is that flash in the end where we get to see, okay, now we're into the plot. This is going to be the story. Because I get to learn more about our main character. I think her name was Daisy. That's what I love, because especially as a horror book, you want to be attached to these characters. And I knew her by the end of the issue, and we're like, okay, I want to follow this girl's journey. I was really happy that it really made the issue more about PTSD than anything, and to develop her own mental health and to deal with the trauma that she went through. So I really enjoyed it. I love the artwork too. It's the artist that did Regression. Again, very good at kind of bringing this brightness to a very horrific story, and I like the coloring with the red visions that she's having. So really cool book. Definitely putting this one on my pull list, and I give that 4 stars, and that is number 3. Moving on to number 2, I really like this book, and that's Hack and Slash 15th Anniversary Special. So, the reason this didn't make my number 1, it is very pricey. It is a $6 book, and there are some pinups in it, and, you know, with anniversary issues, just filling up the issue with pinups, not a fan of that. And then there was other 2 stories that were okay, but I don't think was necessary. I feel like if it was just the first story, which would have been a regular-sized issue, it would have been a bit stronger, but they make it a $3.99 book, but that first story kind of blew me away. So it's Tim Seeley's book, Tim Seeley's story, and obviously he created this character. And it opens up with him at a Comic-Con talking about the character. So it's already extremely meta, which makes sense because Hack and Slash is a meta character. She very much is a dialogue about, okay, what is the final girl? Let's kind of deconstruct this. So I like that it's just totally on its head. Tim Seeley just really talking about his career, honestly. And talking like to the audience as a comic writer and how he feels to be a writer and kind of the anxieties that come along with it. And then Casey becomes real. Or is it Cassie? I think it's Casey or Cassie. Cassie Hack? Casey Hack. I think it's Casey. But yeah, so she comes alive, and we get to see her pissed off at Tim Seeley, because she's like, this is the guy who ruined my life? You created this story? What's wrong with you, man? And then they have like a heart-to-heart in the end, and I love Tim Seeley, where he's just like really honest about his work, and he's like, you also kind of make me nervous, and I kind of hate you as well, because I don't know if I'll make anything as good as you. And I just thought that was like such a impactful story, especially as a writer myself, and I think for any creative person or creator, this is gonna hit home, especially like comic book related. There's just a lot of visuals and a lot of type of stories I think a lot of us can relate to. So I loved it. I thought it was really good. Giving that 4.5 stars. Also, the first story was really gritty, but still really bright. So definitely a really fun issue that, again, you get to learn more about Tim Seeley as well. So giving that number 2, 4.5 stars. Moving on to number 1, which is Jane Foster Valkyrie issue 6. Man, this book blows me away every single time it comes out. I would say every month, but it actually feels like it comes out a little bit more than every month. But yeah, this issue is really good. It's a new arc where we get to see Jane is in the morgue, and one of her patients jumps out, and we find out it's Death. And she opens up to her coworker, who kind of easily finds out that Jane is Valkyrie, but I loved how he got there. You know, it's like usually the seeker identity trope where it's like, oh, well, I did not know it was me, you know, especially in the week where Superman came out, where Jimmy didn't know Superman was Superman. You have this where he's like an intelligent guy who kind of figures out, okay, you're Valkyrie. That makes sense. So I love how this whole book in general puts superhero tropes on its head and has fun with it. So we get to see her become Valkyrie, is like, okay, I'm gonna figure out who's trying to kill Death. And she already puts in the favor with Doctor Strange. Their interaction is a lot of fun. We even get to see Doctor Strange talking about his hands being healed again. And we get to see this team of doctors come together to try to cure Death and try to figure out what's wrong with Death. And I love how it delved into actual medicine, but also making it super heroic. Different artists, but also really good, clean artwork. And even though it doesn't have like the same coloring as Cafu's work and the same graininess, it still kind of had a very similar feel to it, especially that kind of very clean, still epic looking artwork. So yeah, love this issue. I'm really excited to see where this one goes. I think it's just a really epic team up they're gonna have. I love Jane's voice in here. I just love this book, man. It's good. So Jane Foster Valkyrie issue 6 gets 4.5 stars, and that is my number 1 pick. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno. Definitely go follow me on Twitter. Go check out my Facebook. Go check out my comics like Father Like Daughter and They Call Her the Dancer. And every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time is Comic Book Weekly, where we discuss our favorite comics and comic book news. It's our weekly podcast, so go check that out. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Bye.